So last weekend we had a nice retreat about serenity and concentration. And I wanted to focus on some things related to that, especially the 5 hindrances. And as kind of an intro to that, it's said that with serenity, all of our virtuous activities can become more focused and then have a stronger effect on our mind. So concentration actually makes our mind stronger. And it's important to be able to focus our mind on a desired object without distraction, because distraction actually cripples our efforts to develop good qualities. So like say we're trying to develop the 4 immeasurables, which we talked about this weekend, like loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. If we can develop those, we'll gain a kind of inner peace. And the Buddha said that's the way proper to the recluse. It's the proper way to practice. And he also said that if a hindrance is present and we don't recognize it, then we're kind of mismeditating. And so that's not really what the Buddha approved of. So if we are able to develop serenity and insight, then we have this foundation to have the union of serenity and insight. And then that can help us to destroy the afflictive and cognitive obscurations. And these are things that shroud our minds. And so they cause us to circle in cyclic existence, and they prevent us from benefiting beings as effectively as we're actually capable of, as our potential would allow us. So this means that working with distractions in meditation is very important. And by doing that, we'll have a lot more clear recognition of what's going on and more understanding of our mental states. And then I think it's true when they say that that can allow us to have kind of a healthy kind of detachment from these mental states. Like we have a little more space from them. We can develop that, and then we can actually we're not so identified with our moods and our emotions. One quote I read a few years ago that really stayed with me. First, I'll read the quote, and then I'll say the way I kind of take this. This man is a long-term Buddhist practitioner in the insight meditation type tradition in the U.S. He's also, I think, a psychotherapist. He's published a lot in the combination of psychotherapy and Buddhism. And he said that one of the reasons Western meditators, I also want to say he had really good teachers in like Deepa Ma and some of the Thai, Sri Lanka or Thai teachers. So he's a longtime meditator, but also psychotherapist. He said one of the reasons Western meditators tend to progress more slowly than their Eastern counterparts is, now his quote, the tendency to become absorbed in the contents of awareness rather than continuing to attend to its process. They become preoccupied with individual thoughts, images, memories, sensations, rather than keeping their attention focused on the essential characteristics of all psychophysical events, whatever the content. So a tendency to confuse meditation with psychotherapy. And then in his way of looking at it, a tendency to analyze the mental content instead of simply observing it. So I'm not really a bare attention kind of practitioner, and I don't think maybe he is too, but what I take from that, and that quote really stuck with me, because we've heard it said in different ways also. So I think the idea is to be able to step back and witness what the contents, witness these mental states rather than being caught up by them. So don't become the drama, just watch the drama and figure out how to, don't identify with it so strongly, so we can then work with it more effectively. So some of these things that we might come across are these 5 hindrances, which are found in the Pali, Tibetan, and Chinese Buddhist traditions. And these, as we know from our retreat, are sensual desire, malice or ill will, lethargy and sleepiness, restlessness and regret or remorse or worry, some people call it, and deluded doubt. So these hindrances actually don't allow us. I read this and I've really been thinking about this. This comes from the early Buddhist sutras, actually, that the hindrances don't allow us to be able to understand our own good qualities or that of others. And I was like thinking about that because I hadn't ever really thought about that before. And then I'm watching my mind. I'm like, yes, true. I'm now quite angry. I'm not seeing the other person's good qualities, or now I'm stuck in what I like to call remorse for that particular state. Now I'm not seeing my own good qualities. It's like our mind is so distorted then. So basically, we can't understand our own or other good qualities, and you'll have to kind of check that out for yourself. And of course, we can't gain concentration or insight. So these hindrances actually hinder the proper functioning of the mind. So if we can recognize them and properly contemplate them and work with them in meditation, then we can actually purify our mind. So from my way of thinking, we need to explore this in our own experience and see if this is true, what they teach us about the hindrances. Do they really prevent our ability to understand our own good qualities or others? Is that true? We have to look and see. Do they actually hamper your concentration and your insight? And does dealing with them actually purify your mind? I mean, we should run our own thought experiments as we do our practice to help us to see this. Some ways where we can help our investigation is to look at some of these comparisons. And these come from the Visuddhimagga. So one is that concentration is incompatible with sensual desire. So what they're saying is that you can't really have a one-pointedness of the mind that you get in concentration, or if you do have that, it opposes the kind of mental proliferations that happen with sensual desire. So these are kind of like opposites in a way. By being able to have one pointedness of mind, that's the opposing this mental proliferation that happens when we have a lot of desire. The thoughts, they go. And one thing that I also find helpful in looking at these was a way that was described by a Buddhist master, where he talked about the three poisons, and the first one being attachment. He talked about that as a pulling in. You're trying to pull something towards you, versus the next hindrance is aversion, related to aversion, which is ill will or malice. And there you're trying to push something away from you. So you can kind of see that in your own experience. We want to kind of run or get away from things that we're averse to. So that's helpful to see what that's like. And I made up some of my own for what some of these others felt like, because he described pulling in with attachment and pushing away with aversion, and then running around in circles with ignorance, which I found to be kind of true. But I thought that also worked pretty well for restlessness too, and regret and remorse. Just seems like I'm getting nowhere with this. So that seemed to work for me. And then the second one, joy is incompatible with aversion. So there's a kind of a mental bliss, I don't know if that would be my word for it, but and a physical ease that comes with the arising of joy. And that's really pushes against and incompatible with kind of mental rigidity or physical tension that comes up with aversion. And we know that from our own experience, that when we have aversion, we're creating divisions, it cramps and narrows the mind. You feel tense, you feel rigid. So that's where we're doing this pushing away things. But joy is like, is not to be found then. So joy actually can push against that. And then the lethargy, the third hindrance is lethargy and sleepiness. And there they talk about, I think that you might use a translation. I didn't have time to work all this out. They use one called initial mental application or applied thought. And I think you might use course engagement for this. It's course investigation. So for me, at my level of practice, because those are more mental factors for, I think, the absorptions or something, if I just think about me trying to place my mind on an object, and then if my mind is overcome by lethargy or sleepiness, it's really hard even kind of to get it there. And if I could get it there, it would push that away some, because in the way it was described in one, I think this was Buddhagasa or somebody, it was, and again in the Visuddhimagga, it was interesting to me the way he described that mental factor. He said it's like a bee flying towards a flower, and it's oriented itself towards its chosen target. Versus the next mental factor that we get to in the fifth hindrance is the, engagement. Yeah.
That's not a hindrance.
Yeah, the mental factor, they call it, let me find it here, refined engagement or sustained mental application. And that's where your mind can stay on the object. So basically there, it's like the bee is hovering over the flower and fixating on the flower. So one, you're kind of approaching it, you're trying to get your mind to the object, and the other one, you're keeping it there. So basically what the main point is that when your mind is lethargic or sleepy, if you could get your mind to try to bring your mind, pull it out of that, bring it to something. So that would help to clear the mental fogginess and the unclarity that comes with that. And then the fourth mental factor had to do with these things that were incompatible. Happiness is incompatible with restlessness and regret or worry or remorse. So when we're happy, we have a kind of mental contentment, and even the body feels more tranquil. The happiness kind of generates that. And that really doesn't leave room for restlessness or worry if you can cultivate those things. Whereas if our mind is consumed with restlessness or regret, then what that does is it consumes the mind, and we have no sense of direction. This is where, for me, it works like you're running around in circles, because I find that I usually don't get anywhere when I'm in that state of mind. It just helps to try to drop it. And then the last one was this one about doubt. And that's where this sustained mental application, refined engagement, vikara, that's incompatible with doubt. That's the one where the bee is hovering over and fixing on the flower, where your mind is able to stay. And in this sutta where they describe this, they kind of took doubt and they broadened it to mean also kind of generally being distracted, but it includes doubt. But basically the idea is that having a mind that is able to have mental stability, that has this kind of being able to apply the mind in a sustained way, that kind of mental stability, undistractedness that produces is incompatible with doubt. So whereas doubt will create a kind of vacillation of the mind that doesn't really get anywhere. So it's like that thing where they talk about the two-pointed needle. It vacillates this way, that way maybe, but it actually doesn't get anywhere. So I always think of that one, like the being pulled towards or away or running around circles. I always think of that one as like just being stuck, this complete dead end. So I think that through looking at these and just looking at our own experience, we need to try to see, is there truth in this? And because the thing is, if we can see that these things are getting in our way for things that we aspire for, like concentration and insight and even understanding our own and others' good qualities and removing distraction and all of this and that, then we see the advantages of cultivating these and spending the time doing this. And so I think we'll close there. And good luck.